You everybody for tuning in to Coder Conversations. Tonight we have a special guest, Kevin Horek. He's a CDO, founder. He has his own radio show, UI UX developer, and much, much more. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh man, it's definitely a pleasure to have you on the show, man. But yeah, just to get things started, we usually like for guests to give their background. So, how did you get into all of the things that you're currently doing now?
Sure. I have been kind of really lucky in the sense that basically all the immediate males in my family had been in tech since the 70s. And so my dad used to bring home like a little Mac every weekend for me to play with kind of throughout the 80s. And then we finally ended up getting a home computer when I was a kid. So I've grown up around tech for basically ever. We used to be able to connect to the internet through the government when he worked with the government before kind of it was in homes. And so when I was 11, started learning HTML in junior high. Like our computer teacher was teaching us that. And so I basically was building a bunch of band fan sites at the time and just playing with all the tools in high school. We were learning Flash back in the day. It doesn't really exist anymore, and like Photoshop and some video editing and stuff. And so, yeah. And then I went to a local tech college in the city I live in. And then I went to the university here, spent some time studying at UCLA. And then I've basically worked everywhere at this point, from marketing agencies to enterprise companies to the government I worked at the university for a bit. I've taught a bit, been through selling a startup that I was a co-founder of, and kind of now, yeah. And like I also host a radio show, TV show called Building the Future. And yeah, like now I'm just kind of consulting UX, UI. And lately I've been doing a lot of prototyping in right out of Figma into AI and using Cursor and Windsurf to actually build out these clickable prototypes. So that's kind of a quick overview.
Oh yeah, that's pretty awesome, man. Yeah, I have a similar background. Always been around technology, and I took a few detours here and there, but ended up being a coder. I see that you're more on the UI UX side. What made you choose that over like development?
I think the funny thing is development, like I always knew what I wanted to do. I just never understood or could get my head around like the syntax of the language that I was trying to write it in. And maybe it was just because I never spent enough time, but like how, well, it can be so complicated sometimes to just
Yep.
figure out, okay, well, it runs locally, I deploy it, and now it's broken. But like, why is it broken? With some of the
Yep.
AI stuff, it's like, oh, well, you didn't put your Supabase keys into the deployment platform. It's like, oh, well, that never would have dawned on me, right? And so like I'm just a creative person, and so it's just like a totally other side of the brain, right?
Exactly. I'm more on the more mechanical side, so I think that's why I enjoy development. Like my
Sure.
creative juices aren't really there, so the UI UX thing is hard for me. So, but I mean, like you spoke about AI, it's really amazing that it's empowering creatives to be able to make stuff and not have to go through a developer.
Yeah, like it's been literally a game changer. Like I've wanted this ability for years. Like I've tried a number of times to be like do some basic coding and take some classes and some tutorials and stuff. And I spent a bunch of time doing some low code, no code type stuff as well, which had some success in, but just being able to fire up a React app or um, Python app in, a matter of minutes. It's more complicated than that, but you can get something up and running, and then you can theme it. And yeah, it's been game changing for me.
No, awesome, man. Yeah, so I see AI really empowering creatives, technical people. I think as long as they embrace the upcoming tools, then they'll be fine. So, like, can you kind of tell us what are some of the primary tools that you've been using and what have you been able to accomplish?
Sure. Like I really like the AI tools in Photoshop or Adobe Premiere. And then sometimes you'll generate like an image in Photoshop or parts of an image. And then I'll bring it into Runway to actually animate it. It's like a or turn it into like a video. I was playing with Sora. I even paid the couple $100. I thought it was terrible. So some of the tools are still kind of evolving on the coding front. I've been using Cursor a ton, Windsurf a bit. My favorite's probably Cursor. I really like the V0 by Vercel, the hosting provider. I've been using the Expo as well to build native, well, I guess React Native Android and iOS apps right from a code base. And I, to be honest, it's almost just like the natural evolution of you starting with a template on something, right? Or getting ideas. Like AI will never replace a human being because I don't think it's not creative, right? It's really good at
Mhm.
regurgitating certain things. And so just leveraging the tools in my everyday workflow. And then I use Perplexity a ton too. Like if I want to build an app or like a prototype of some sort of app, I'll literally go to Perplexity and say, build me a spec doc for development, and then I'll say like, I want to use React, Tailwind, which is a CSS framework, and maybe like Next.js or something, whatever, and then just feed it in what you're hoping the app does, and it'll generate you a good spec doc, and then you bring that into Cursor and you basically step by step walk through building out the app. Sometimes I do the actual theming uh, in Figma, and then I literally just turn on the developer mode in Figma and copy and paste the CSS out, sometimes component by component, and just get it themed, right? By prompting Cursor to like build out the whole thing. So yeah, it's a bit manual, but I could never, it would take me forever to do that if I was coding it myself.
Yeah, you made a great point. Like all of these AI tools are just that, tools. Like they're not gonna complete, or they shouldn't completely replace humans. And I think they're gonna put more emphasis on creativity
Yeah,
versus how to build something. And that's going to give us opportunity to express our humanity in more intricate, more sophisticated ways without having to spend all this money on developers if you're not technically minded. So I think it's incredibly powerful.
100%.
So yeah, I know you've also have your TV show slash radio show. What made you start that? And for the audience who's not aware of Building the Future, can you tell them what it's about?
Sure. So I originally started it to really get over my fear of public speaking. I had wanted to do a podcast for a number of years. And I just was like too scared to actually post anything online, like even a blog post or anything. And the funny thing about it is like nobody would have read that or maybe even listened to the show at that point, right? Like it was so I, irrational, I guess. And so one day randomly I got asked on LinkedIn to be on somebody's show, and I wasn't what they were looking for, but I just saw that they were airing on this station in Atlanta, and I said, "Hey, is the station looking for any other shows?" And just kind of by luck, I got asked, or I they were looking for a similar show. And basically, the premise of the show is I just interview founders and CEOs and investors and kind of in the startup tech space, um, and just have conversations with people that I want to kind of learn more about what they do. Show's been going on almost 10, well, it'll be 10 years this year. And yeah, it's been fun. I kind of got over my fear. And it's been great to network. And I'm sure as you kind of probably have experienced as well, right? Like it's a really great networking tool.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I started it for a lot of similar reasons. Like me and one of my friends, we used to have like really good phone conversations about our progress in the tech industry. I got
Sure.
my first coding job around 2016 or so.
Okay.
And in this industry, you're able to make progress really fast. So like prior to tech, I was working at a hotel making like $11 an hour, and
Right.
then first tech job making like 60K a year. Then a few years later, making six figures. So we're kind of like,
Yeah.
we need to spread this information out. But like technical people, we can kind of be introverts, and
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, speaking doesn't necessarily come naturally to us. So just starting a podcast, that was like an excellent way of spreading information while also working on your speaking skills. And like you mentioned, networking, like you would never get to speak to a lot of these people in real life. So um, now they kind of have an incentive to speak to you. So yeah, can you tell us about some of the more interesting guests that you've had on?
Yeah, I think probably well, I had, Scott Cooper from Andreessen Horowitz on a couple years ago, right before he released his book. That was pretty cool to talk to that guy. Um, really enjoyed his book actually, and just about just getting investment and kind of just seeing it from a VC side of things. Um, Sh- Sridhar Ramaswamy, he led Google AdWords for 15 years. He was a really good interview. He actually had left Google at that time and was running a privacy-based search engine called Neva. Now he's the CEO of Snowflake. He was a really cool guy. There's another guy, Hampus Jacobson. He runs a Pale Blue Dot VC firm out of the UK. Well, actually, no, he's somewhere in Europe. I can't remember. And super cool guy. Like his team worked on a ton of early kind of OS stuff for Android and BlackBerry, and they actually sold a company to BlackBerry, and just some of those people that have just done some really cool stuff. It's interesting because the more I find accomplished somebody is in their career, the more like humble they seem to be and willing to kind of help people along. It's the people you've never heard of that seem to have the egos, but it's the people that have actually done something that seem to be the most humble. That's been my experience. Have you found that?
Yeah, some of the most accomplished people are like really down to earth. They want to help
Mhm.
people. They want to share their knowledge, and that's
Totally.
really cool. Like, thankfully, we haven't had too many like egomaniacs. But with you being in the industry for so long, I'm sure that you've come across a few.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, typically, how do you deal with those people? Like, you just cancel the show early, or you just try to ride it out, or
I kind of got lucky in the sense that I figured out early on in my show to partner with a bunch of PR and marketing firms across the country and basically just give them the type of guests that I'm looking for. I think I've only had like I've done, I don't know, probably 600 plus episodes at this point. Not all of them are posted, but I think I've only had less than a handful that were not good. Like there only I think 2 or 3 episodes have maybe never aired because and the big one I could think of, they're actually like a pretty well-known person. I won't say them, but the hilarious thing is they wouldn't really answer any of the questions. It was just like this roundabout thing. And I was like, well, I'm not. So I cut the interview short and I just was like, forget it. But yeah, for the most part, I've been lucky enough to tell the people that have been sending me guests, that kind of what I'm looking for. And they've been pretty good to deliver. I think the challenge is like you can usually tell even just with if somebody emails you, or just if you have a couple email exchanges, how they're probably going to be. And
yep,
a lot of the times the reality is if you haven't done much in your career, the sad reality is hard to fill 45 minutes of content, right? And
exactly. And yeah, I definitely agree with you there. People who are usually well accomplished, you just give them a question and they can just go on for like 20, 30 minutes. So it
exactly.
makes the
Yeah.
show really easy.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, have you had like any amazing opportunities open up as a result of the radio show, or like do you get recognized in person?
Uh, well, the funny thing is this because I live actually up in Canada, and so where the show airs, it's
Uh-huh.
not really in any of my local markets. I've had people that like recognize just like my voice and stuff sometimes on like phone or whatnot, or they've heard of the show, but I've never had it in like walking down the street or something because I don't know where it would kind of like I would have to be potentially in those cities and they would have to know what I look like, which on radio doesn't really work that well.
I think that's kind of the best of both worlds. Like,
100%.
you're kind of famous, but you can still go out and about and nobody bothers you. I think that's like the sweet spot.
Yeah, I always joke that like it's like I don't even make the alphabet. It'd be like a Z list at the very best, you know.
Do you primarily limit your show to like technologists, or do you kind of like just a wide variety of careers?
No, I try to do it tech. I've had people in other industries, say like construction, or I don't even know. But look, construction's a perfect example. Is I'm not a handy person. I don't enjoy it. I don't have the tools to do it. I don't really know what to do or even ask. So I find those shows are not very good just because I don't know what I'm talking about, right? And so I
Right.
really try to have people on the show that selfishly I want to learn more from, and then I think those come across as the best shows because then we're both into it. Where if it's just me struggling to ask the guest questions because I don't know what to ask because I don't know anything really about their industry, even if they're building software in that space, I find the shows aren't very good. So I kind of cherry pick in that way, I guess.
Yeah, that's really smart. I agree with you. Like, if you don't know much about the industry, you're not that enthusiastic about it, then you're just sort of asking questions to fill up the time, and it kind of comes across in the finished product.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and you're kind of wasting the guest time as well, right?
yep, exactly. Um, so yeah, do you find like like any like interesting opportunities open up, like because I have the podcast, I met this guy and now we're working together on these cool projects?
I have got some work out of it. I've got to host or MC kind of some conferences or be part of some award ceremonies. So like yeah, it's been cool that way. I think the coolest part is just being able to stay, I think, current with what's happening in the tech space, right? And people talking about what they're building. That's kind of been the coolest, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's always interesting because initially I started off as a coding podcast, and I kind of find that gets a little limited. You pretty
Yeah,
much talk about most of what you can talk about in a few months, and then you just kind of repeating the same stuff. But like just being able to touch a wide variety of industries and see what's going on, what's the current happenings, that's really powerful because it kind of puts you in the know.
totally.
So like from all of the guests you've been talking to, like what is like your outlook on the future? Like where's the future headed? I know AI is probably the primary component.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as somebody that's building AI agents right now daily, they're super useful. And yes, I obviously think AI is going to be part of the future. My why I'm kind of so hesitant about it is because it's so overhyped right now of what it can do and or what it could do one day that it's like I really wanted the Rabbit R1 to be what it said it was. I bought one. It's like the biggest piece of garbage and it just collects dust on my desk. I love the feel of the hardware and sometimes I pick it up just to kind of play with it, but I never turn the thing on. I actually tried to put Android on it and so like I don't even use it like that. And so I think that's the perfect example of where we're kind of at with it. Is it's like everybody is told that it's gonna, crush their jobs, and sure, it might automate parts of the boring part of your job, and you will probably maybe have to learn some new stuff. But the reality is in my opinion anyway, I think that's always been the case, especially if you're in tech, right? Like, the
Yeah.
reality is, if you've been a WordPress developer, for example, it's been a race to the bottom for 10, maybe 15 years. Like, eventually, unless you're fine just doing that, you're gonna have to probably learn a bit more than just WordPress development. Sometimes you still might do it, but it's kind of like everything, right? And so I really think if you can leverage AI to speed up your job and get rid of the boring parts of your job, you're going to be way more valuable to your company or starting your own company. That's the other thing. I actually think if you want to start your own company, the barrier to entry now is so inexpensive. Like, I'm coding my own apps for $20 a month,
Oh wow.
US, right? Like, I'm literally coding my own apps, where before this tool, it was such a struggle that I just wouldn't do it, or I was never happy with what I came up with. And yes, it's a bit of a struggle, and it's not as easy as it, just portrayed on YouTube. But if you can basically build your own thing now for, tens of dollars a month, then the barrier to entry, even to start your own thing now or become more valuable at your company, it's never been simpler.
Yeah, that's what AI really does for a lot of people is it empowers non-technical people to be able to do things they normally wouldn't without having to pay for, an expensive developer somewhere. And like you mentioned, it's going to create, I feel like it's going to create a lot of new markets
Totally.
because people are going to be able to use their creativity and get their app up and running quickly without having to dump a bunch of money into it, so it lowers the risk of creativity.
Totally. And even time to market, right? You can have something up within days where before it would take months.
Exactly. So just removing those technical barriers, that really empowers a lot of people. But I think like something that you're mentioning is that people have to shift their mindset. Like they have to kind of let go of this singular tool. Like I'm a PHP guy. They have to learn this new tool, this new paradigm, and it's going to enable them to be much more productive.
Yeah, and the reality is you can basically use the free versions of a lot of these tools to get something out there and validate your idea. And you don't have to raise all this money anymore, which is actually really interesting, because instead of you trying to rate, like, the thing that I always find interesting about it, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is everybody thinks they need to raise money to build their company. But the piece they forget about is, a lot of the time, especially if it's just like an idea and you have nothing other than maybe a pitch deck and an idea, is you're going to give away a lot of equity. And
Yep.
but nowadays, if you can basically build a clickable prototype, maybe even getting a working version that's live, even if it's crappy, but you have maybe like a few users, whether they're paying or not, almost doesn't really matter. Then, instead of giving away 50% or of equity, maybe you give away 5 or 10 or 20, right? If you do raise money. But the reality is I think if you spend some time and you struggle a little bit to build these things, you realize how much you can probably do on your own, or with maybe like a small team working in the evenings and weekends, and using AI to actually basically build something where you potentially don't have to raise money, or you can hold off raising money, or maybe you raise a smaller amount so you can keep more equity. Because the reality is like, it sucks when you sell a company and you own 5%. Like, I'd rather
Yeah.
see you own 80% or 60% or anything above 50%, really.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like when you build up a company and then you're able to get kicked out of your own company because you're no
100%.
longer like the majority owner. But yeah, I think like like you mentioned, do people really need to raise equity? What are they doing with the money? Like if you have a very specific purpose, a very tailored plan, then sure, it makes sense to maybe raise some money. But I think a lot of people just raise money because, oh, that's the thing to do. Oh, I got my own business. I need more funds. They don't know exactly why, but they just want to raise money. And, like you mentioned, it's going to put them in a situation where they're having to give up that equity. But, like software is free to create now, or you can do it for incredibly low cost using AI tools and things of that nature. So, do you really need to raise money initially? Like, when you're creating a prototype, getting initial users on board, having that MVP float out. I don't think so. Um, so if you wait and you have that workable prototype, you have a user base using it, then you can negotiate a much better deal when you do want to raise money and expand the company, and you know what exactly you're going to use that money for.
Exactly. And you can do a lot of your marketing stuff with, well, I use Perplexity, but they have a free version, same with ChatGPT. Like to write copy. Is it the best? No. Is it going to get you 60 to 80% of the way there? Sure. And then you maybe modify it yourself. And maybe down the road, if it's successful, you hire a proper copywriter or marketing people. But out of the gate, the reality is you could just use the free versions of all these tools, or sign up for a trial of something and build out your thing and then cancel your trial before you get paid, or you have to pay, right? And then keep working on it, right? And just iterate. Like, I think the weird thing that people seem to get stuck on too is, okay, if V1 goes out today, there's nothing wrong with version 1.2 or 1.1 or version 2, whatever you want to call it, going out days or weeks later. It doesn't have to be months later. It's just get something out there, make little iterations, and just get in front of people. There's even tools out there now. I actually was playing with a tool called what is it called here? Gummy Search, right? They have a free version where you can like go actually spend some time trying to figure out ideas to build, right? Just off of Reddit. And so if you don't have a startup idea, it's like, go use these tools that have free versions to try to go figure out an idea to build.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people get caught up in the making of the money versus actually having a cool idea that they want to share with the world. So, that's kind of like why they end up focusing on trying to raise money so quickly. It's like, oh, I want to be profitable. I want to have this money rolling in versus, I have this amazing idea. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, I think if you're idea centric, then you're going to be a lot more willing to take your time, use these tools, get something out there, and you're not going to be in a rush to uh, try to raise money, and therefore putting yourself in a worse position in the long term.
100%. Like, the best time to raise money is when you don't need to raise money, which sounds stupid, but that's the reality.
Exactly. I find that that's true even for like negotiating a salary
100%.
at a job. Like
Yep.
you're going to be able to negotiate better if you already have a job while doing it because
Yep.
you're not dependent on this new job. You don't need a job just to survive.
Exactly.
So yeah, with your experiences in the UI UX industry,
Yep.
how is like AI changing your workflow in that industry?
Generating ideas quicker has been amazing. Like, let's be honest, not everybody is feeling 100% every day of the week, right? And so if you have a project and a deadline and you can't think of any, you're not feeling creative that day, it's just I'll punch it into something to, like, Perplexity or that V0 by Versal, and get it to just generate me something. And sometimes that sparks an idea, or you could just sometimes like pretty that stuff up. Or Figma's got some AI stuff there. It's kind of uh, okay at best, but just trying to getting it to generate ideas. You can use AI to. I was actually doing a record project for just a company I'm working with in the dental industry, and they wanted to take a bunch of classic, famous record covers and rework them for the dental industry. And it was interesting because there's some of those covers were done basically like hand drawn by somebody in the 70s. So how am I going to replicate that?
Hmm.
But you just use AI to select the sky and say, okay, can you generate me, the sky with like clouds and birds and whatever else? And then it's like you select the person, you say, okay, well, like I want to change their outfit to be like whatever, right? And then it's like you select all the surrounding areas and you add elements and you change elements, and the album covers ended up looking nothing like the original, but I used AI to like generate different pieces of a whole thing. And I did that on a lot of them, right? Sometimes you can go find artwork or create your own artwork that just from stock photos or mash them all together. But just leveraging AI in kind of creative ways to get products done or projects done has been kind of game changing and getting ideas off the table, or even just speeding some things up and automating some things, right?
Yeah, it's really gonna unlock the potential of creative people.
Yeah.
So, for example, there's a rap artist back in the day named DOC. He used to be on, I believe, like Ruthless Records, and later on went to Death Row. But what ended up happening with him was he got in a car crash and his voice got messed up. So, um, it became very hard for him to continue rapping. But now with
Sure.
AI, he can continue making songs like with his voice prior to the crash, and that's a really interesting potential use of AI. It's gonna like open up the creative avenues, but we just have to start thinking outside of the box.
Oh, totally. And even just like obviously it's cool that he can go back and do that, but even just using AI voices in your projects, I've been doing that, right, where you get it to write a script and then run that script into an AI voice generator. They're not always perfect. You might have to redo parts of it and then create little videos around like product demo videos, right? Using AI voices. It, and then, yeah, like if you were creating music, like sure, you might want to modify your voice or let it do parts of the song for you. Like how is, I don't know, like to me, it's all about like the final product, and how you get there is almost like irrelevant, right? Because nobody really cares at the end of the day. It's like if it's good, does it really matter how it was generated?
Right. And AI, it's a we have to look at it as a fantastic prototyping tool. It
Totally.
automates a lot of the legwork that we would normally use to create MVPs and prototypes, but ultimately we're going to put our human touch on it and make it into what it needs to be. And like you said, like, no, does anybody really care if the ending product is good?
Yeah, and like we've had auto tune on music forever, and the reality is people have been using templates forever, right? It's just the next evolution of that.
Exactly. I think like the problem is that a lot of people, AI can make them lazy. So, say for
Yeah,
example, they have a podcast, they want to use two AI bots to generate all the content and be the podcast host, and they do nothing. But no, that people are going to be able to tell, okay, this is AI, this is low effort, but you can use it to scaffold, to search for ideas, and to really enhance your creativity. Like where AI enhances your creativity, it's going to be really powerful.
100%. Yeah, like the reality is it's either, well, it's interesting because I had somebody explain to me, it's like, what's good design? Like, in your opinion, what's good design?
Let me see. I think you have to have a clear objective in mind and something that effectively fulfills that objective. So, for example, a lot of times people confuse UI UX with making the site look pretty, and that's
100%.
not, that's not necessarily it. So, like,
And,
what are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, and the answer I got years ago was, if the person that has to actually use the interface, if they like it and understand it. And
Mm,
that's always resonated with me, because I remember doing a project, this was a number of years ago, for nurses, where they had to do some stuff at their desk, and then they had to do some stuff bedside on a tablet. And we user tested it without, or not on nurses to begin with, because we wanted to, kind of early on, and it got crucified because it made no sense, right? Like what? Like, why would he be switching devices halfway through a process? But
mm,
then when we actually tested it with nurses, obviously we had to, iterate a bit, but it it made total sense, right? And so I think that's what people forget all the time. And I know a lot of people, well, not maybe not a lot of people, but there's been a big thing, to your point, that people are kind of angry at designers lately because their site or looks beautiful, but it doesn't convert, right? And the reality is, I think we forget that a lot of time as designers, that it's not, the web isn't an art piece unless you're building a specific project that is literally an art piece, which is very rare. Most people care about conversions. And the sad reality is, if the purple button converts better than the orange button, we're going to make the button purple. It doesn't matter if I prefer orange, right? Like, the end
yep.
of the day, it's about the target user. And I even go a step further sometimes, and I say, if I'm not the target user, and even if the client isn't the target user, it's like their client or their customer, it doesn't almost doesn't matter what me or the client likes. It's what their customer actually likes and uses. And if they understand it, well, that's all that really matters. And if they can use it, and the two of us might hate it, but like, that's just the reality, right? It,
Yep.
it's a
Well,
weird mindset, though.
no, that's a fantastic point you made. Is that okay? I'm running a business, and if I'm designing a product, it's not whether I personally like it. It's whether the customer that's going to be buying it, whether they like it, and it helps them efficiently do the job. Like, like all of the major sites, retail sites, they're not the most beautiful
Yeah.
sites out there with all the
Yep.
latest animations. They're there to help you, help you quickly buy a product. It's like, so,
Yeah, like
the
Amazon's the perfect example. Like, arguably, I think it's one of the worst websites on the internet, but usually, like, it clearly converts.
exactly, and that's really designed. There is, what are we intending to do, and are we focusing on that versus the frivolities? And that's the
Yep.
interesting thing about a lot of people say, hey, I want to be a front end developer, and they think they're going to use all these cool CSS animations and all these amazing effects, but 9 times out of 10 you're just creating forms and
Yep.
wiring them up. Like the visual a lot of this stuff is not nearly as artistic as we think. It's more like the business utility.
100%. Well, the reality is, if the business doesn't make money, everybody goes home, right? Like, that's what it
Yep.
comes down to. It's not about anything other than that simple thing. And like, yes, it obviously should look good, and it should work, and it should function, and your customers should enjoy using your product. But at the end of the day, it's basically about them 100%. It's all basically about you, the user.
Exactly. And you made another great point about, like, you're not creating like this unique piece of art, you're creating something to be used by somebody. It's almost like, okay, I'm creating a washing machine. I don't need to handcraft this washing machine and, personally create every screw by hand. It's going to take way too long. Like, you're making something that is going to be replicated and used over and over. So like tools like AI, it's going to help us create a lot, get rid of a lot of the mundane tasks and create what the user is looking for way quicker. And I believe due to all the marketing data it's able to consume, it's going to enable us to know what the users really want a lot quicker.
I also think too that is if you can leverage some of these tools, because a lot of times you don't have the time to put in some of these animations like you mentioned. It's like you have whatever, I don't know, just pick a number, like 10 hours to build something.
Right.
Obviously, you might not have time to put in those animations, even if it makes sense for the project. You might have to do it in a later version, but if you can use AI or a tool to get you, 60, 80% of the project done in, an hour or two, instead of it taking you 4 or 5 hours, you might have time to actually put in some of those more embellishment type stuff that actually potentially add a better user experience, right? Then I think that's the mindset that people need to get into. It's like, let these tools get rid of the boring kind of setup stuff, and then you get to do the fun stuff because you freed up a bunch of time to actually do some of the fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And like even in the creative work, say for example, you want to create like a commercial or something, you can
Yeah,
utilize AI voices to scaffold things out. And
totally.
once you have the budget to hire on a human, just bring the human on. So there's like so many more possibilities if we just think outside of the box. And I kind of think that's where the economy is moving, is a lot more mini micro companies who are able to put out products, because I see like the bigger companies, it looks like they're trying to intentionally shed staff. So we're going to kind of have the reverse trend. Like back in the day, there were a lot more mom and pops until
Yeah,
Walmart came in and ran everybody else out the business. Now I think it's kind of going back to the reverse, where the mom and pops are now empowered to be able to offer something unique.
100%. I think the thing that people forget, as somebody like I sold a company to a big company, like
Mm.
building like the company or the product we sold, it ended up selling for a few $1,000,000, just to give you
Oh
some
wow.
context. Um, but the reality is a couple $1,000,000 to a big company that does, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, it would have taken them probably double or triple to build the same product, just because of just the internal kind of red tape of this stuff. So what I think that the cool thing now is, to your point, is you can be a small agile team that builds something for, not a lot of money, and the tools are making it a lot quicker to get to a version 1, that it would be a lot easier to sell a company for a few $1,000,000 than it is for that company to actually try to put you out of business. It's just, they'll just pick it up and keep going, right? And that's the thing. I think it took me a long time to realize that. It's like, and the reality is you're going to be talking to different people than a competitor. And the best part about building something in a space that is already has competition is the market's been validated.
Right. I think that's what's incredibly powerful about having a podcast to go along with all of these technological tools, is that you're speaking to industry leaders. You're able to identify trends of, okay, this is happening, this is the need. Now I have an idea of a product I can make, and now I'm going to AI, going to create a quick MVP. And like you mentioned, if there's a huge need for this product but it doesn't exist, companies will be willing to pay for that MVP, so they don't have to go through all of the rigorous approvals and all the things of that nature, budgeting to get the MVP going. It already exists. They buy yours for a few millions, and now you're set.
Yeah, like, yeah, it's, or if you can get lucky and you build a product that investors can use. Like, I interviewed a guy a couple years ago now, where they were building a calendar tool that obviously that investor would use, but they built a whole back end to support their that person's kind of assistant or multiple assistants, so they could actually like manage their calendar. And so when they're doing sales calls, they're basically talking to people that could potentially give them money for their company, right? And
Right.
I'm not saying go build a calendar app, but if you can figure out an angle where one of your markets is potentially VCs, that if you have to go raise money eventually, if you're just talking to them because they're using your product, it's a lot easier to start building those relationships early on. And some might even say, hey, are you looking to fundraise? Or let me know when you're looking to fundraise, because they're using your product.
Right. Yeah. So like, me and you were both kind of technically minded, and it would be easy to kind of just stay in that space. But it seems like you mentioned, like creating these connections and networking is extremely important, especially if you want to get your own products out to market. So can you kind of tell the audience of some effective ways that you've been able to meet people to get these products out to market?
Sure. I want to add one thing before I answer that. I think the crazy thing is the tech part is the easy part nowadays. I think the actual hard part is getting it in front of people, is doing the sales and marketing of the product.
Hmm.
I I think the best way to some, like, cold calling sucks, or cold emailing sucks. If you can, leverage your LinkedIn network. I use LinkedIn. I've gotten majority of the things I've gotten in my career have come from LinkedIn. You know, I can't really stand social media, but it's kind of a necessary evil sometimes. Just start posting stuff on different channels and see what works on channels. And if a channel's not working for you, stop posting there. If you can't write content, use AI to write, some of the content. You give it some bullet points and tell it to turn it into a LinkedIn post with hashtags. um,
Hmm.
it's also just trying to get involved in the community, right? Like, everybody probably has some sort of tech community at this point, or a community in the space that you're trying to build an app in. And a lot of times it's just, you need to make one connection, and that one connection can, open a bunch of doors for you, right? It's not going to be overnight. It might take 6 months. It might take a couple of years for something to pay off, but it's a lot of it's patience and just getting out there. The other thing that I found really useful is there's a monthly fitness meetup on Sunday mornings. And the funny thing is, one of the investors that runs it, um, I've know people that know him for years, and I wanted to meet him. And I saw on LinkedIn, we've been connected on LinkedIn forever. And I was like, oh, he's doing this fitness thing. I should probably go. So I went one Sunday, obviously met him because he's there, and, he's coming around to all the new people that he's never met before. And I said, why are you sending this out by a newsletter or LinkedIn? Like, can I build you like a one-page landing page for this event that you run, monthly? And he's like, yeah, that's perfect. And so, I spent a few hours, and I actually bought a template on Webflow and customized it. So, I literally spent, half a day on it, maybe. And now, not only does he mention it every time I go to the event that, that I built this thing, him and I now are like friends, and we're actually working together. And it was all because I just volunteered to, spend a few hours of my own time to build this thing to help out what he's doing. Right. And
Hmm.
that's been more valuable than, you know, any of the cold calling or just randomly stick. It's like, a lot of times it's just ask, volunteer, help out. These people see that initiative, right? Like, most people won't take the time to build these simple relationships, right? And they're not hard, and you don't have to ask for anything. And if you're willing to volunteer, you'd be surprised where it takes you.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, and I've heard a lot of similar things from some of the other guests about networking. Like the mistake they initially made was they went to the networking event with like a specific agenda in mind,
Yeah,
like I
you
need to
can't.
get 5 contracts. But then once they stopped doing that and kind of focused more on just getting to know the people, like, oh, I'm just meeting these cool people. People are a lot more willing to work with people that they like. So once they focused on the relationship, then the results started coming.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's interesting about that too is you learn about pain points for people, right? And maybe how you can help to solve those, or maybe they can solve some of your pain points. Like, it has to be two two two-sided, right?
Yep, exactly. Like, so how do you recommend? Okay, so for example, I'm not the most social,
Yeah, me either.
and you had, speaking anxiety as well. Like, how do you recommend people kind of get past that, and just get out there?
I think there's a few things that have worked for me in the past. Is anytime I go to a networking event, like I hate, I, I'm can be awkward, but if the other person is awkward too, it makes me really awkward.
Hmm.
And so what I found works, if you're going to anything, try to go with somebody that's like an extroverted person. So you basically just follow them around the first time you go because they're going to introduce themselves to people. If you're right there with them, they're going to be by default, you just have to introduce yourself to them. So try to ride their coattails a little bit. And then once you go to the same kind of event a couple of times, you'll know some of those people after you've had conversations with them. Therefore, it's not as awkward. And as you keep going, it gets less and less awkward, and you start to actually know these people. And then they know other people that come and they introduce you. And it's just kind of this, you have to just take that first step. The other thing that I find, and it's kind of to go back to what I did with the website, is I, and maybe it's just laziness, is I don't want to go around to every event and be like, introduce myself and have small talk because I hate awkward small talk. But if I offer to volunteer and spend a bit of time building the website, and then the person that runs the thing acknowledges and mentions me every time that I go to this event, and then everybody knows who I am, and I don't need to know who they are out of the gate. It's like a reversal side of things where then people will come to you and be like, "Hey," like they know who you are and kind of what you do, and then it's less awkward because they like there's no, you kind of get rid of that first layer of awkward small talk. It's because they kind of know where you're coming from, and if they're probably coming over, they want your thoughts or whatever on something, right? So I just try to go right after the top person first and try to do something for them to, kind of get over that hump and hurdle of something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great advice, man. And to your earlier point was, like, you should just go, like, just show up, like, don't go with an objective in mind, like, I'm gonna close this deal, because you're putting pressure on yourself. And especially if you're introverted, there's just showing up is pressure enough. So, like, once you get there, you should look at that as a victory. And like you say, the more you do anything, the better that you typically get at it. So the more you just show up, eventually you're gonna feel more comfortable. Eventually, like you say, your reputation is gonna precede you, and people are already gonna know what you do, and they're gonna initiate the conversation. So it all starts with just showing up and not putting this performance metric barrier on yourself and adding to the pressure.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah, like I think volunteering at these things or offering to volunteer can really help um, break down that barrier, especially if you're an introvert.
Something I've seen that a lot of people have been getting into lately is pickleball. I'm not,
Yeah.
it looks like some kind of tennis or something, but
Yeah, that's my understanding. I have never played, but my mother-in-law plays like every day religiously, so
yeah, I actually have a friend. He started his own consulting business, and he said he's been playing pickleball and meeting some of his clients from just doing that.
totally. It's
So
just getting it sounds so stupid, but most people won't even make a small amount of effort to put themselves out there in some sort of capacity. It's wild to me.
yeah, I think, especially like as introverts, it's just so comfortable being in your isolated space. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm in the safety of my house, and nobody's gonna be judging me or whatever. But a lot of that stuff is just our own mental, I don't know, mental demons that make us imagine, like, okay, if I show up, somebody's gonna ridicule or be rude to me. But when you go, it's usually not like that.
Yeah, uh, the reality is I think majority of people that go to those things are just genuinely there to be like you, and they're probably just as scared. They have the same or maybe just different insecurities about being there, right? Like nobody likes networking and walking into a room where they know nobody. Like I guarantee you nobody likes that, right? And maybe there's a small percentage of people that enjoy that, but like, 99% of people that are there don't enjoy it out of the gate, right? It takes a while, but it's like kind of anything in life. It's like if you want to learn a sport, you're not going to be good out of the gate. Like you're just not. It's not happen. It's not possible. You need to like keep going and showing up and trial and error and see what works and what doesn't work, right?
Exactly. Just experimenting. I think like success is pretty much a mental game. Like you have to avoid beating yourself up. Like that's pretty much why I stopped drawing, because it stopped becoming fun and I turned it into some exercise of comparing myself with the greats and oh I'm not good at this and this, and once you do that, all of the fun is sapped out and it becomes this pressure fest, and you no longer enjoy it, and the human part of it is gone. So I think especially us as technologists and technical people, just going out and meeting people and being human, that in and of itself is a great goal to strive for, and it will eventually reap fruit.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, man, I know we're getting to kind of like the top of the hour. Did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts? It was amazing having you on.
Um, I think the reality is just until you get out of your comfort zone, you're only holding yourself back. And the reality is that there's people out there that are they're no different. It's just like just make a small step to pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Like you don't have to if you're scared of going to a networking event, it's like, well, try to go with somebody that's like an extroverted type person or that's been to that event before so they can introduce you to people. It's like maybe if you're that terrified of going to one of these events, like don't go by yourself for the first time. It's like, sometimes you have to kind of just dip your toe in the water a little bit, right? You don't have to jump in, uh, but you just need to work at it, right? And I think no matter where you are in that journey, there's always things that you're kind of worried about or whatever, right? It's just a different worry at a different stage, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like you say, just dip your toe in the water. Just get out there and just do it. Like even with this podcast, the first episodes were terrible. I was like just like laying on the couch talking on the phone and terrible audio quality. But the more you do something, you gradually get better. Like keep the initial bar low. Make sure like you're focusing on just doing, and then you can always improve the quality later. But doing just starting and consistency and gradual improvement, that's gonna get you where you need to be.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And yeah, like I would say the same thing about my first probably, I don't know, 100 episodes maybe are just terrible. Like you can go back and listen. Like they're brutal. Maybe there still are, but it doesn't really matter.
So yeah, and just to close this out, man, if they didn't catch the beginning of the show, where can people catch you at?
Sure. You can always go to my portfolio. It's just KevinHorek.com. And there's I haven't updated in a while, but it's kind of some design work. And there's a link to the radio TV show there. And connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always adding people. So yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. And yeah, this has been awesome.
Awesome, man. It was a pleasure having you on, and thank you everybody for tuning in.